And we'll give a moment here for our esteemed chairman and fellow commissioner to return. They must have went to Celtic Fox. Yeah. Here we go. Mr. Beck, it's with the greatest honor that I hand the gavel back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gales.
You're now
Appreciate that.
Chairman Beck.
Thanks for filling in quite admirably.
He's tapping Mr. Gales is here since both of you skipped out on me.
Dang, we'll take care of it this time. Well, apparently, it looks like we're ready to move on to item E3. So we are ready for the staff report. Ms. Driver.
Yeah, I'll kick it off here, Mr. Chair. This went to the council and it got remanded back. I think you received minutes from the council minutes regarding this item for you to look at. I can just briefly summarize that, and then Annie can update you on what was handed out tonight. So basically, summarize council minutes. They wanted to remand it back to consider the option that was in the staff report about screening. It was talked about to either do a straight zoning to I-1, which is what you approved, or to do a option to do a PUD, which would have a condition on screening. We didn't get into the specifics of what the screen would be, but so they wanted you to consider that, and to that end, Annie has, and we passed out some language we would think you can consider one way or the other. It's just something to talk about. So Annie, do you want to read over that and so everybody understands this is an option for you to consider?
Yeah, the draft language we passed out is just to address the council's concerns with screening of the property, particularly along Lower Silver Lake Road, which is the street frontage, the train tracks, and the industrial park. The language we developed was all equipment and vehicles should be enclosed inside the building. There's an existing building there, or screened from public view by a 6-foot privacy fence along Lower Silver Lake Road, the east property line, which would be the property line that's adjacent to the residential, and the south property line, which is that property line which is adjacent to the Topeka Chamber Industrial Park. And then additionally, no materials shall be stacked higher than the fence. So if he had any additional materials that were being stored on the property that weren't necessarily vehicles, those couldn't be higher than the fence itself. And since there's not a lot of room on this property, I think if you put the fence along the property lines, that would be okay.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Driver. I apologize, I was not a participant in the last go-around with this one, so I am jumping in with both feet and trying to catch up to speed. Reading the materials we have before us, I think summarizes what our options are. I would like to know a little bit from the past meetings, as far as what was discussed, a little more in detail as far as what your thoughts are on the screening versus why we went straight I-1. What's your thoughts?
If I remember right, I don't think the neighbors to the north had any concerns over it being screened, and that those who may have concerns were far enough north back that there weren't any major issues. The screening on the east side, that is also owned by the property owners? That residence is owned by the property owners? So history-wise, that building has always had vehicles within view. And you're right next to a train track, so you're not hiding anything regardless of the size of the screen. So I guess I'm just wondering from the council's perspective, what was the overriding factor that caused it to bring that back?
The Neighborhood Improvement Association had come before you and stated their opposition, basically from an image standpoint. So the question was asked of me, what is the plan for this area? What is the plan for this corridor, if you will? So I think they were coming at it from a standpoint of we're transitioning from an industrial into agriculture residential area. Can we at least have a screen to address the corridor image going into the residential area, going into the neighborhood area, if you will? So I think that was more of a concern, that if we could screen, that would be a great option to help with that going into the neighborhood. So.
And to be clear, we're referring to the neighborhood that's along Silver Lake Road?
Which neighborhood?
We're to the west is what we're talking about, the industrial park, correct?
So you're right, as you go east on Silver Lake Road,
Okay.
if you're going east and going into so west of Furman Road, we're planning industrial, so that's the use itself is consistent. It's just how it looks. So as you cross over that threshold, as you go east of Furman, if we could do better, if we collectively, I guess, if the property could screen whatever storage it has, then I think that's what they were most concerned about.
Okay. Now, if I'm not mistaken, a public hearing, public comment is closed. There is none at this meeting, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Just want to make that clear. I guess just in reading the materials, with Mr. Reinhardt here in support of the proposal, and he owns 2 properties, or his family does, directly across from the property we're talking about. And Mr. Guilfoyle was also there, and he's up in the northwest corner of the property, and he's in favor of the project. I guess my other question is the NIA, Ms. Miller, I believe is her name, that was here and supporting the NIA. Did she provide any written documentation as to opposition from the NIA, or was it just all verbal?
They had a written testimony that was passed out at the original meeting, yes.
Okay.
From their meeting in March, February.
Okay. Thank you. One other thing I was looking at, I did a nice drive down Lower Silver Lake Road via Google. Boy, that's a great app. But with the bird's eye view, or the road view. And I was looking at the industrial park to the west. And as I looked down the street, there's several properties in the industrial park that has open storage facing Lower Silver Lake Road with conduit, pipe, vehicles, equipment. In fact, the only one I saw that had screening of on any consequence was the John Deere dealership, and you could see all of the equipment over the top of the fence. So a 6-foot fence, to me, isn't going to screen what we're trying to do.
I might point out, if you do windshield drive down there, right across the street from this, there's a whole bunch of old farm equipment parked along the road.
Yes, Google showed me that too.
I guess that's probably my main concern. That's a very open area, and to screen that right next to that railroad track, I think I would have some safety concerns just because I'm familiar with that area. Driving east or west and being able to look back of a train coming from that opposite direction, at least right now in its current state, you have a clear view both ways. So,
So, back to the screening down in the industrial park, as far as what we're trying to accomplish. Looking at what I saw with the John Deere dealership, I don't know that that screening would make much more of a great presence pictorially on this property, just like it doesn't really at the John Deere dealership. So are we really doing justice of placing a burden of a PUD on this gentleman for a 6-foot-high privacy fence that really may not, other than the fact that we did note staff had recommended nothing stacked above the fence height, which may be difficult. Mr. Finder, you have?
If I may, just so it's clear, the PUD that you're considering as an option is not a, it's not a drawn PUD, it's simply a textual PUD. So, we would not require them to go through and have the drawings of what it would look like. So it's much like what we do with conditional uses. Just we have a condition and we put it into the ordinance or resolution.
So what's Annie's got in her document is basically what it's going to be.
Right. That's
okay. That wasn't clear to me. So.
Okay. Sorry. No, the applicant would not have to go back through and do submit any more materials to us. If that's.
As far as materials not being stacked above the fence, did you say that it does exclude vehicles?
Yeah, I mean, the equipment and vehicles would either be needing to be enclosed the building or screened. But anything else that's in the property other than equipment or vehicles couldn't be stacked higher than the fence. So if he has types of products stored there.
Has the applicant stated opposition to the fence?
He has indicated he's willing to work with us on screening just tonight.
Be curious to know how that would affect his ability to utilize the building that has the open doors on the Lower Silver Lake Road side. Once you go back to the right-of-way line and put a fence, how close is that going to be to that building to make those doors unusable?
How's he gonna be able to maneuver stuff around it there? I would personally have a real problem with screening a little dinky piece of property like this when right west of it is all kinds of other stuff that's much more ugly than this is.
I think if you saw any equipment, it's in keeping with that neighborhood. I mean, it's agricultural, it's industrial.
And it looks like we're going to require fencing along Lower Silver Lake Road, the east side of the property and the south side along the railroad tracks.
Yeah, I find that hard to take.
So we're protecting the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
Seen anything over 6 foot?
Don't want the train crew to see those trucks parked in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Bill, would you mind clarifying that just a little bit as far as why we screen this, the south side?
We, I don't know that was greatly articulated at the council meeting. It was, but it was brought up specifically, so we included it in the conditions. I can't probably speak.
Okay.
I can guess. I mean, I can't speak.
Were they actually intending that the screening along the west would screen the property and the tracks, and not necessarily putting screening on the south side? Or were they?
No, I think
very
it was
specific?
specifically mentioned to add screening along the tracks. It was specifically mentioned. It wasn't elaborated on, but it was mentioned. My only thought on that would be if there's a future, the industrial park does go to the south of this property across the tracks. So if there's a future building of any nature, quality, they would have to look at whatever's across the tracks. So that's all. That's my guess.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone know how high the tracks are? Just curious.
Maybe,
They're not,
they're in.
are they more than 6 feet?
I think they're not much higher.
'Cause
than
that could take care of it.
roadway.
Well, you definitely see a boxcar above the top of
Mhm.
a 6-foot fence. And the driver, the engineer would more than likely see over a 6-foot fence.
So it's also our.
And someone from the road would likely see over the fence and see the crane on the tracks. Okay.
So-
Privacy fence means opaque in some fashion by definition.
Yes.
Yeah, we would assume that would be a wood privacy fence.
Chain link with the strips.
Going back to the letter, I'm sorry, I apologize, I don't have a copy of the NIA's letter. Was there a specific opposition in it, or were there a lot of names attached to it, or I have not seen it, so I'm just. 'Cause I know that was one of the comments the city council made, was that the NIA opposed their straight rezoning.
Was it two different times they looked at this? In both times, they objected to it.
Okay.
And just for clarification, where we are designating the red line up there, there's a lot immediately east of there between it and Furman Road. Is that still part of the property? Because in plan and contextually, it all appears to be one property, even though we've got designations of it being otherwise. You understand
Right.
what I'm saying?
Oh, you're talking about the line that goes
The house.
between the red.
The
Yeah,
house
he's
is-
replatting this. Basically, he owns the residential property as well. He's replatting that into one larger lot for the industrial use.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So it would
So
also
that
fall
parcel
within
we're
the,
in.
okay. So it's not like we have a property immediately adjacent to it, we have some concerns about. It's all one parcel. Yeah, okay.
Except for the house that, yeah,
Okay.
outside the red boundary.
If you want, we're looking, you think we have the letter?
Yeah, the minutes, or Teresa Miller's letter from the February NIA meeting does not indicate anything necessarily specific about why they were opposing it. They would like the property to stay R1 with the special use permit for a vegetable market. They did meet again, and I thought I had this right here.
And just from reading the minutes
Oh, here it
from
is.
last meeting, Ms. Miller stated that there are currently farm equipment being stored and sold by private owners in the area, and it looks junky.
It's across the street.
I think that's what you were, what you were referring to already, that's already there.
That property is
So
also owned by the applicant in this case, if I'm not, or at least family across the street. Is that Myers also?
No, that's,
If I may just ask a clarification on that, please.
I'm Tony Meyer. I own that property with my brother George and my brother Tom. People have been backing out on that road for over 50 years. We ran that market since 1958. Never once did we ever have an accident in front of that property because of people backing out, which I thought was amazing in itself.
Yeah, sir, if I may, since this isn't really the public hearing portion, you can only answer specific questions we ask, not give us more info. So I apologize to cut you off there, but the property on the north side it is not owned by Myers family. Is that
We own 3 acres over
Where the-
across from the market there.
where the equipment is situated on the property?
Well, we had a sign up over there for when we were running the market, and in the last 2 years, we rented it out to Barbara Britt Flores of Manhattan, and she was gonna rent it out again last year in 2013, but she had a terrible accident up there on I-70 at Manhattan. She was going to go to Kansas City, and she is still in a nursing home today. So I know you didn't ask the question, but the chances of that ever being a market again is nil, and it'll be just a dead property, really. It won't generate any taxes for the city or anything, but we did for 50-some years run it. We never ever had any trouble there, you know.
Okay.
So, but here's another thing too.
Well, we'll stop, we gotta stop you there. Thank you very much.
Well, it is a point I'd like to make.
Well, if we ask you a question, then we'll have you answer it. But thank you, Mr. Meyer, I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Just for clarification, has there been any concern from public officials, city officials, that there's an issue with some violation of city ordinance or something because of the current utilization of the site? Nothing that would normally create an issue where we've got to have a fence up there because for some reason we're having ordinance violations?
Oh, yeah, currently this open storage, outside storage, or any storage, inside or outside, would be a violation of the R1 district. In fact, I think that's how this issue came up. I have...
The premise of going to the I-Light.
So, right, so moving to the I-Light would resolve that. And I'll just say, for your consideration, not that we have to use this as a, an example, but we do get concerns from public officials about how outside storage looks in this town.
Mm-hmm.
And should we have some design guidelines for, we can allow the use, but should it be screened? And so, that's one of our things that we need to be looking at as we update our code. But so I think that's what you're hearing from council when they send this back.
Okay.
But currently, there are no design standards to adhere to.
That's correct. There's no screening provision.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
I understand the city council talking about that outside storage, but I'm having a hard time getting over the fact that there's about 20 or 30 times as much lineal feet of outside storage just west of there as there is on this property. I don't see any big difference in it along there. This is a very, very small piece, an individual versus businesses. And I just have a real problem imposing this on him when we don't impose it on the rest of these along here. So I'm going to have a hard time voting for it.
Mr. Chairman, I would concur with Mr. Lackey. I'm an advocate of kind of raising the bar and establishing some design standards, but I think you need to do it on a broader, more kind of zoning or ordinance construction requirement. I think to kind of pick on these folks who are really just doing what they've done for 50 years is somewhat unfair. So I would concur with him.
I agree. I kind of feel the same way. And that area, just growing up in that area, that area's natural transition from agriculture to some limited residence to industrial. So, again, to select that part out as to enclose it just seems inappropriate.
Well, I really think the location of it is a good break point to go from the industrial, the I-1, or industrial in general, with Furman Road right there, and then off to the east. Go with your rural or residential R1 or whatever you want to the east there. So you said the piece just south is also within the industrial park, so there again it's basically completing the block of property with I-1. I just have a hard time thinking that a screen fence will do much good, if any, in this situation, and don't see the need to have it installed.
it could be said, Mr. Chairman, that by not requiring screened-in fencing everywhere else and putting one there almost starts to draw attention to it.
Agreed.
It's true.
Although I think the city could be putting itself in a precarious position if they just decide that this should be the one person that we use as an example in that area. So I don't think it's practical or reasonable to put that requirement on this property.
And that's where we need to go back to what Mr. Finder was talking about. If we want to upgrade what we do in this city, then we need to start at the grassroots, and that's the design standards. What we actually put in our code that gives justification for what we do. So I'm also all in favor of raising the bar, but we need to start at the level that we can support it.
On equal footing, yes.
Correct.
I would entertain a motion to approve with the staff recommendation that it be zoned I-1 light industrial as stipulated and not PUD.
Second.
Any more discussion? Just for clarification, that would go back with the original recommendation of city council, or of planning commission to the city council.
They asked for, or Mary mentioned that we could resubmit our original recommendation along with reasons. I mean, they'll get our minutes, so is that reason enough?
Correct. The reasons have been discussed tonight, so it would be a motion to resubmit your original recommendation based on the reasons discussed tonight.
Ms. Fanny, and the only thing, the reason I made a motion to adopt it again is in fact by adding Mr. Beck and I into the vote. It's not just the same individuals voting, we've added 2 more votes to it, so. Okay.
I might just add that I think I agree with what I'm hearing from the commission, but I might just admonish the owners as well. If you've got, be a good neighbor. If you've got junk out there, you probably ought to get it out of there. I mean, don't give them a reason to think that it's ugly and it needs to be cleaned up. Just go clean it up.
Any other discussion before we have a vote? Hearing none. Chris, would you please call roll?
Mr. Lackey.
Aye.
Ms. Jordan is absent. Mr. Jefferson.
Aye.
Mr. Hall.
Aye.
Mr. Gales.
Aye.
Ms. Cuevas Stubblefield.
Aye.
Mr. Crook.
Aye.
Mr. Beck.
Aye.
And Mr. Beardmore.
Aye.
Motion passes with a vote of 8.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer, thank you for being here again tonight in attendance and answering our question. Okay. We are moving on then to item F with the zoning matrix calibration. Is that Mr. Hoover?
Well, I'll kick it off and hand it off. We're gonna,
I'd just say, is this Bill? That's all. That'll get both of us.
yeah, you're right. I'll try to update you where we are with this and what we wanted to do tonight, which is, I don't think we've come back to you in a few months with what this looks like. Since you last saw it, and again, it's been a few months, I don't think it looked like this. I think we've changed the look of it quite a bit and the format, and we broke it up into 2 sections, a residential and a commercial, generically calling those residential and commercial, although there's more specific uses in each of those. So what we feel pretty good about, we've gone out to the development community, or at least we had a development forum on this issue. May? No. Yeah, early May. And we feel pretty good with the residential side of things, meaning we've gone line by line, looked at it. There's still going to be a couple things we see, and that maybe you will see. But so as you look at it now, the residential's in pretty good shape. The commercial we're getting more into. That will probably take more discussion and more staff time to flesh out some of the items there. So what I wanted to do, well, that's where we are. We've also hit upon a couple new uses. One in particular that we've had a meeting on, community gardens with the public. We'll probably have that specific item on your agenda in June, just for some work session. Some stakeholders want to come in and we can talk about it more. So we don't want to get into necessarily specific standards tonight, but we do, I was going to have Bill, the other Bill, hit on some of the key, on the highlights, if you will. And this isn't Sports Center, so be prepared.
One of the things, so where we came up with this, looked at probably 10 other cities, typically in Kansas and Missouri, and typically about the same size approximately. And going through here, one of the thoughts was by making these changes to the matrix, you're going to see, probably the next go-around, you're going to get to see the rest of the story, which is, instead of just the matrix, you'll get to see the definitions that we're revising. So some of this stuff, you may wonder what we're actually doing, but once you see the definitions, it'll make sense. And then there's also a 14-page section in the code called Special Use Regulations. And I've been working on that off and on for about 2 years. So you're going to get to see all that stuff there too. And I'm probably about 85% done with the commercial, and the industrial is not going to take near as long because I don't think there's as many issues in that. It seems like we have a lot of issues that have been hanging on here where we've had to make a lot of zoning interpretation through my 5 years here, and so now we have an opportunity to improve some of those things. And one of the things some of the other cities do is on like auction houses and pawn shops, secondhand shops, they put a cap on those in the C4, or they even cap all their stuff in the C4, which might be, if you have a 10,000 square foot building, you get to have 10% or 20% outdoor storage. If you go beyond that, then it has to be screened in. So that's one thing we talked about. Another one, indoor gun ranges. Codes have been changed, so there's...
Bill, can I interrupt just one? Did you want to go with the commercial first then?
That's what I'm on.
Okay, so just so everyone's on the same page, we're going through the commercial.
We already touched on residential before.
All right, the highlights of the commercial start on the commercial section, page 1. Can you just let them know where you are as you're walking through the highlights?
I'm going through here in alphabetical order. So if you look on the auction house, previously it was an A, which meant it was automatically allowed with really no restrictions, except for like parking and landscaping. So now we propose to have it as a provisional use and put a cap of perhaps 10, 15, 20%, 25%. So if you have, the bigger the building, it's more appropriate to have more outdoor storage stuff. And we've had some buildings where they have a small footprint, they go out and put 2 or 3 times the storage out in the parking lot, and then it looks like what we just had the previous petition on, what the complaint was. Next one going down there, the automotive rental establishments. I'm also doing some work, it's not totally indicated here yet, but we're trying to clarify automobile dealerships and the heavy trucks, and we've had some petitions go through here. And a couple years ago, we worked on commercial vehicles. So we're clarifying some of that, and we may make some of those, or propose to you to make those provisional instead of automatically allowing those. And one of the things may be, if you're in your automobile dealership, which would be C4, we'll differentiate that from C3, where it's just automobile sales. And the C4, one of the provisions may be that if you have a tow lot, all that's going to be screened. a C3 auto sales, for instance, we would not allow you to do, unless you did a conditional use permit, a automobile service repair type 3, which is engine repair. So if you, that's not really appropriate in a C3 district, but it's not clarified now, but it would be if we made that a provisional use. And down there on the bottom, you can see of that first page, the gun ranges would be allowed as a right in the I-1 and I-2 districts. Going over to the next page, another one that I think most of you are familiar with on liquor sales would go from C1 use to C2 use before it's permitted, and that's based on, I've reviewed other PUDs at the request when we looked at the one on Southwest 37th by Burlingame. The liquor stores was, when we were looking at PUDs, it was excluded out. It was more than one time, and it was one of the highest ones that was excluded. So if the Planning Commission keeps saying C2 use group except for liquor stores, at a certain point we need to just say, hey, this is not appropriate. It needs to get moved to a more intense district. Actually, I think it was, I'm wrong, it was C1. So it would go from C1 to C2. And going down to the next one, medical equipment with personalized fitting and retail sales. These are optometrist, hearing aid sales, and this is a word I have trouble with. Prosthesis stores. And we combine these into one category. So if there's anything else that comes along similar, it would come in there. And we've made those conditional.
If I can jump in and hold your place there, just so everyone gets that, these are sales. Normally, we don't allow sales in our code in office districts. So this is a little bit of a departure, that you would just have a sales store. Now, you can do sales if you have if you have an optometrist. Obviously, that's an optometrist's office is allowed in O&I, and you can sell eyeglasses as a subordinate use. What Bill is referring to is this is the primary use, sales. So just wanted to clarify.
All right, thank you.
Previously, these were not allowed, so now you'd be allowed to do those things. And I think there was some inconsistency on that, because if you have an optometrist office in a O&I1, I'm sorry, O&I2 or O&I3, they were probably doing it anyway. Going down to a new definition that we have is down towards the bottom. It's called retail sales and service. And what we're doing is taking a laundry list of these uses out that are low intensity. In one of these, you'll see in a minute later, is, let's say, sporting goods store. Okay, pretty low intensity on that. And there will be a new use now, sporting goods with gun sales. So what we're doing there in the C1, a sporting goods store, it's still permitted, but if you go with gun sales, it would need to be in the C2. And that's based on, again, a couple of previous zoning histories that we've looked through. And we've also looked at some other cities, and gun sales is typically a little bit more intense use than what's maybe appropriate right in the neighborhood.
I'm going to jump in one more time here on the retail sales line item there, and maybe you were going to say this, so you've taken, I don't know, 50 or
15 to 20 probably.
15 to 20? Okay. The code right now lists out every type of retail use you can probably do, and it adds it adds to our code. It doesn't make much sense. A retail, furniture sales is the same as electronic sales. So this line item groups them all together. If we have you listed, if there's a sales use or another use that is separated out from that, then we will list it in here, but we don't feel the need to list 30 different retail sales uses that are general in nature and all exhibit the same characteristics.
Like jeweler, and so we do have sales and service. So if you bought your computer, you can take it back to the same place. So that's sort of almost down here at the neighborhood level.
But you will, in your items, you will define the low intensity so that people know
Right,
what
so we've
low
got the
intensity is.
list. If you go to the definition, you can figure out pretty much where things are falling in place there.
Grocery stores would be under this.
Grocery store, I believe it would be, yes. All the food ones pretty much are in there, so like deli. And now going over to, unless someone had a question on commercial, I'll switch over to the industrial. And on the landfill demolition, we are proposing that to go from, let's see here, make those conditional use instead of already permitted in the I-1 light. We've had complaints from council members about where we've got these in the actually in the downtown area where it's zoned I-1, and it's like, well, why didn't we have a hearing on this? So that's where we're in response to their question. Going down to self-storage, I've got some pictures actually of some office buildings, or what looks like office buildings, and they're actually self-storage facilities. And so they fit right in a neighborhood, and I actually worked on one of these many years ago, probably 10 years ago now. But the what happened was it was going through as neighborhood commercial, and a company out of Chicago called Lockup, and they built some high-end ones, and so they agreed to make it look like an office building. So our thought was we could make these as a provisional use, and it might take some of these older retail buildings around town that are sitting there empty. And what you can do is if, like, you, instead of having garage doors on self-storage with the RVs sitting out there and boats, yes, you'd still get to do that, but that's in the I-1 and the I-2 district. If you want to use the lower zoning districts, such as C3, C4, those kind of things, then you could take some of these buildings and use those for business storage or personal storage. And we would make provisions on there, so it would be a provisional use. You would have to meet the requirements. And some of those things, the other cities do this also. Some of the things they'll say is no businesses operating in there, and you can't turn it into like hobby shops where people are making, doing woodworking and stuff like this. It's just for storage. Interior doorway entries only, no garage doors, except you could have one main entrance into the building if somebody's unloading. But it becomes a more aesthetic, lower intensity type of self-storage.
Can
Can I also jump back, Bill? Above that, there's a parking surface lot, and we haven't really talked about changing them. I know everything in yellow, we're looking at merging or revising in some way, clarifying. That's what that yellow is for. So a lot of those are placeholders that we're going to come back and maybe show you how we did that. So you don't see any changes necessarily right now. But one thing that has been brought up in the past, and I don't know if it's this body or where I considered that, but downtown with surface parking lots, it has been suggested in the past to maybe look at a conditional use for surface parking lots in an area that is highly dense and we want full of activity and ground floor activity, and that demolition of buildings that lead to surface parking lots are probably not in the best interest of downtown, at least everywhere. So maybe we should have that conditional and not by right, just allow it. So I throw that out there, but that's probably one we would consider coming back to you with maybe a conditional use.
Okay, so we on page 4, commercial?
Yeah, and I think that was, there's nothing on page 4 that we're changing. So, yeah, I think from a commercial standpoint, you know, the self-storage is something we've always had. We always do PUDs for self-storage. So I think that these are the sort of things we want to fix our code. If we're giving variances or accepting stuff out, we probably should make our code read the way we want it to read. So Bill hit on that. Demolition landfills, another thing that we always, you know, I-1 isn't probably appropriate all the time for a landfill. So changing that to conditional would be good. And then we're just gonna clarify a bunch of these others. Liquor sales, of course, was the other one that he hit on. Couple things we just don't have in there. One thing that I've had inquiries about since a couple of years ago, you could not have firearms or discharge firearms in the city. Is that right, Mary? So, used to be that way. And so our code never really reflected allowing a gun use. So having an indoor gun range is something that other cities have. They're actually some very, very nice. So that's a new use we would allow in industrial. So I think those were sort of the key things to summarize back. Lastly, there were some uses that we talked about, such as the outside storage. We talked about that tonight. Once you get into C4, you can have outside display. Outside display of cars, outside display of whatever you have for sale. Home improvement stores, you know. So one thing that I'm hearing, and we're probably going to try to come back to you with, is some standards for outside displays, whatever the use is, whether it's a pawn shop, whether it's nursery or whatever. Should we have that? And this discussion tonight with the Myers property brings that to light as well. So I think we can come back and say in the C3, C4, I1, maybe we have a set of standards for outside storage.
Typically, we get more complaints on used stuff being set outside than we do new merchandise. Like if you go by Sutherland's, they got garden tractors sitting out there, they're brand new. No one really complains. But then when you go by the secondhand stop, it can look pretty junky out there. And so perhaps we can do that legally. We might have a little more strict standards for used merchandise than new.
You get complaints on that, I don't know what they call it, flea market or something down on South Kansas around 20th Street or wherever it is.
Catch-all.
Yes.
Yes.
It's kind of a miniature version of 29th and Adams.
Yes, we did, and we have, they've actually been cooperating and helping to clean that up, so.
All right.
So this is a non-voting item.
So this was, you're right, this is just for discussion. We want to get your feet wet again. We changed the format, want to make sure if you see anything, again, bring it to our attention in terms of a use that may not fit or a new use that we don't have. The whole point is to have a modern code. And we're starting with the uses. We want to make it relevant to today's needs. And that's kind of what this is. It just so happens we want to make it user-friendly as well, because the easier this is to understand, and I didn't explain the color coding here, but I think you probably picked up on yellow is residential, blue is office, red is commercial, gray is industrial, and purple is mixed use. If we can do that, and come back with some standards, I think that's where we're heading. So next month, we'll probably do a community, we'll update the commercial more. We'll probably have more of a work session on community gardens, because we've had a lot of input on that, aside from our meetings here. And, yeah, I think we'll probably look at, so we're getting close.
Okay, sounds good, thank you. Any other items before us, or anybody have any discussion before we adjourn? Or a motion to adjourn? I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. With that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Say manufactured homes. You have these manufactured home parks, but they also sell.
It's right in here.
You think that would be
It
this
falls into that.
automotive?
In that C4, this is the catch-all. Anything above a car that has a title, like big trailers, combines,